Hello, everyone. My name is Kathy Bollinger, Managing Director of York County Community Foundation's Embracing Aging Initiative. We're a charitable organization located in York, Pennsylvania, and we are working towards creating a community where all ages can thrive. Embracing Aging's work is supported by a donor, Anna Gardner, who over 110 years ago gifted her estate so that older residents could have the best quality of life possible as we age in York County. And we're honored to carry on her legacy. Too often when people think about aging, they focus only on the negative parts of aging and they think of it as only decline. And we know that there's so much more. So Embracing Aging has been working to improve attitudes on aging and help people think more positively about aging. And one of the ways we're doing that is by hosting a series of online sessions where we talk with people who will share their tips and experiences, their challenges, their stories, their ideas to inspire us as individuals to think more positively about our aging, for us to think more positively about older people as a group, and for all of us to take action to create a York County that is not only a great place to grow up, but a great place to grow older. To learn more about our work, please visit our website, embracingaging.org. And if you're on Facebook, please follow us at YCCF Embracing Aging. This morning's session is going to be recorded, and a recording of it will be available on YCCF's YouTube page, and it will also be available in an Embracing Aging blog in the coming weeks. Our format for today's session is that we're going to have a question and answer interview style with our guests for the first 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to you for questions. But please, along the way, show your support for what's being said using the reaction buttons, and also feel free to put things in the chat box. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with introducing our guest. I'm delighted to have Martha Lester Harris joining us today. I was recently introduced to Martha through a mutual colleague, and I learned that Martha is very interested in understanding how the brain works. She wanted to help her daughter, who was born with a learning disability, and so she really focused on learning about how the brain works. And she uses this knowledge to transform learning experiences. And she first did that in schools for helping teachers interact with students. And now she's turning her attention to using this to helping older adults have the best quality of life possible as we age. So we're happy to have her joining us today for a session titled Love Your Brain and Body. Welcome, Martha.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Kathy, and to see some familiar faces and meet so many new ones. It's a joy to be with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and start. One of the things that you said to me very early on in our conversation was the brain is not static. So can you help us understand what you mean by that? The brain is not static.
Absolutely. Well, this is a good example of how our brains are not static. How many people used to use Zoom a year ago? I'd be very curious to know. So our brains have been able to adapt to a new form of communication that has become a necessity due to the pandemic that is about to enter its second year here in Pennsylvania. So that's a prime example of how we're able to adapt to new technologies. But what's really phenomenal, for those of us who might have been born in 1955, like me, I became a Medicare senior this October, is the transformation that science has discovered about how our brains work. In 1999, scientists identified two phenomena that debunked prior theories, what I was taught when I was growing up in science class, that our brains are static, that no matter what, you're going to lose your brain cells as you age, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, that's been completely debunked by the discovery of two related processes: neurogenesis, the ability of our brains to create new brain cells up until the time we die, and neuroplasticity, the ability of our brains to rewire themselves, particularly to compensate for other areas of the brain that may have been impacted. Some of you may be working with Parkinson's sufferers, and you've seen perhaps the therapeutic benefits of intentional walking to help folks recover the capacity of a portion of their brain that was taken away through Parkinson's to help them manage the symptoms like trembling and balance problems that often come with Parkinson's. So those are just two examples. And All that we do at my company, all that I care about, really is that brain-body connection. That how we feed ourselves, how we nourish our bodies every day has a direct impact on our cognitive capability, our mental acuity, and frankly, our emotional outlook as well.
Thank you, Martha. In Embracing Aging's work, we work to debunk myths. And one of them is that older people cannot learn new things. So it's nice to have that background and that context to support us as we debunk that out in the community. One of the other things that we've talked about, and of course you just said about the mind-body connection, is the importance of physical activity. And we all know that, but can you tell us a little bit more as to why exercise is important to our brains?
Absolutely. Exercise is a natural generator of the positive chemicals that improve our mood and attention span, serotonin and dopamine in particular. In fact, to show the benefit of physical activity, I wonder if I could ask people to just take a minute and stand up if you're sitting in your chair and just focus on breathing and how important it is to generate oxygen in our brains. And physical activity does that very efficiently. I think the Association of Older Adults recommends 150 minutes of physical activity for older adults. That breaks down to about 30 minutes over 5 days each. So I'd be curious, and you can put it in the chat, how many of you actually do get physical activity on a regular basis, maybe 4 or 5 times a week? And the reason I wanted you to stand up is we're about 10 minutes into the presentation, and that's about the average attention span now. Our brains have become so adjusted to quick, we tend to get distracted. So by standing up, it kind of changes our blood flow, and that helps bolsters our brains. Some of the most fascinating research I've come across in my 20-year quest with my own daughter to understand how our brains learn is the direct correlation between exercise and our brain function. These two brain scans represent composite scans of teenage brains that were evaluated by Dr. Chuck Hillman, who's been a real pioneer as a neuroscientist to really document the correlation between exercise and brain health. If you see the image on the left, if you went out and took that brisk walk this morning like I thought about doing, my brain would be completely energized now, right? But instead, I've been sitting, getting ready for this webinar, so my brain is blue and green. It's somewhat static. So just even 10 minutes of exercise can make a difference in terms of increasing your energy. A practical way to apply this brain science is, let's say you have a difficult paper to write, or you're studying for something, or like me this weekend, I've got to pull my taxes together. That's not one of my favorite activities. I'm going to make sure I take a walk Saturday morning before I sit down at my desk to try to organize all my paperwork. And then maybe take another walk to reward myself when I've made some headway in my spreadsheet. So it's simple advice, but the key is to make sure you've got a component of cardiovascular activity while you're exercising. So the better your heart can pump blood to the brain, the more efficient your brain can function. And as we age, we may lose some of that cardiovascular strength unless we work that muscle, that organ, the heart and the lungs every day. Here's someone in the chat. Since COVID started, I've been doing at least 30 to 60 minutes dedicated to exercise. Joan, that's tremendous. And how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel better? That's a great way to use this kind of extra time. I mean, how many of us commute to work anymore? I go from upstairs to downstairs. That's my commute. So if that's my only exercise every day, that's not going to be sufficient. So I've got a yoga mat set up in the dining room. I try to use the space I have because the gyms have been closed, right? So I'm grateful that the nice weather, and we're starting to see perhaps in early spring, we can get outside more and probably feel more safe in our socially distant way because we're outside, we're not in confined indoor spaces. So physical activity builds the brain, it energizes it, it increases blood flow, and it improves the ability of our ongoing capability to make decisions. That's our prefrontal cortex, which is the dashboard of your car. That's how you control the speed It helps me make eye contact. It helps me recognize faces and put recognition to that, because it helps process all the information that's stored elsewhere in my brain. So one way to build your prefrontal cortex is to make sure you do upper body workouts, particularly for us as older women as we age. I found, sometimes it's a little harder to push something up or to grab that thing on the upper shelf, right? So just some simple arm lifts, maybe some light weights can make a big difference on improving your upper body strength, which then keeps your prefrontal cortex strong.
Oh my goodness, Martha, thank you so much. I had watched a video several years ago, and it said that everybody has 24 hours in the day and sit for 23 and a half, but make certain you get up for 30 minutes. And I got to tell you, I've been taking advantage of, like, in the middle of the day, because working remotely, I'll get up and I'll do deep knee bends, or if I'm
That's
warming
great.
a cup of coffee, I'll be doing something. And I keep
Exactly.
thinking to myself, when I go back to work, I don't know what's going to happen, because I'll be in the office kitchen doing scrunches or squats or whatever, and people will be looking at me funny. But hey, in addition to exercise, we have been told and we know the importance about eating a rainbow, and we're going to send a slide out to everybody that shares a little bit about eating that rainbow and the different types of foods and their benefits. But Martha, tell us about the impact of processed sugar on our brains. Help us
Oh, sure.
understand that.
Well, this is an area we're just starting to dig into because it can have deleterious effects on us older adults. Our bodies are only geared to process so much sugar. And unfortunately, most of the modern foods we consume today are loaded with what's called processed sugar. And it's processed by the processors, but it can't be processed in our bodies. And it ends up contributing to really bad diseases like obesity and diabetes and even hypertension, because it can slow down our heart function. But in the brain, it also impacts our cognitive skills and our self-control. Scientists are now seeing a correlation between sugar and salt addiction and overeating and other forms of addictions like substance abuses, because it stimulates those positive areas of our brain that reward us, that make us feel good. I mean, how many of us crave like a sugar rush? For me, my biorhythms slow down at 2:30 in the afternoon. So I'm either looking for a cup of tea and maybe a cookie to go, to go with that, just to give me that little boost of sugar. But that fades. And actually, if you do too much of that, it contributes to buildup in your body that your body can't process, and that can lead to diabetes. So I'd always heard about the connection to diabetes, but it wasn't until recently I began to see the connection between the cognitive impairment as well. So we want to continue to build those new brain cells by physical activity, and that same physical activity can help increase the serotonin and the dopamine, which are our pleasure centers in our brain, to make us feel better. We'll not only look better and be stronger, we'll feel better too. I think exercise can also be an antidote to depression and attention deficit disorder. There's a fascinating author by the name of Dr. John Rady, who wrote a book called Spark, How Exercise, the Revolutionary Science of Exercise in the Brain. He's a Harvard psychologist, works at the College of Medicine, but his specialty is ADD and attention deficit disorder. And he's seen many, many case examples of children and young adults who can overcome those challenges in part by bolstering their exercise, and of course reducing their sugar content and their salt consumption as well. Somebody's been doing the awakening from Alzheimer's. They often, right, exactly, strong correlation between diabetes and Alzheimer's. So again, we recommend a lean diet. The one that we particularly are fond of is called the MIND diet, Mediterranean Neurodegenerative Disease Delay Diet. You can Google that. One of the doctors we follow closely is Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who heads up the Alzheimer's Research Clinic at the Cornell West Medical Center in New York. And she's done pathfinding research, particularly on the impact of Alzheimer's on older women, and really keen on this MIND diet because it's lean, it's good proteins, it's food that your body can not only absorb and need from a nourishment point of view, it doesn't come with the excess sugars and salt.
Thank you, Martha. And in a little bit of time we have left before we want to open it up for question and answers, can you tell us what other tips you have for us to be in better control of our health as we age?
Well, I think that, like Dr. Mosconi's works, her book is called Brain Food, The Revolutionary New Science of Nutrition and the Brain. And she was a neuroscientist who then also got a degree in nutrition because she saw the correlation between the two. And I think you're going to jump to the rainbow slide, if we could just focus on that for a minute. This is a very simple thing to do. It's just the next slide, Roth. There you go. Um, Early on, and I think I had the benefit of one of the early health food nuts in my father. He said what we eat makes a big difference on how healthy and active we are, and he lived to be almost 87 years old. So when you're putting your plate together, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, think about having a balance of color. If you think about food as a rainbow, you'll get the polynutrients from the red vegetables and fruit. The purple and blue gives us other forms of polynutrients. The greens give us other forms. The white, but the pot like cauliflower is kind of emerging as a really popular alternative to potatoes. You can rice it, you can make pizza crust out of it. Legumes, white beans, pears, that gives us other benefits. And then finally the yellow and orange. So this natural healthy site recommends eating at least 2 foods from each color group. So that's a little more sophisticated than just making sure you have your 5 fruits and vegetables every day, because it is the mix, that diversity to make sure that you get all the nutrients that your brain and body need just naturally through food. Then if you've got a calcium deficiency or a vitamin B deficiency, you can take supplements to offset that, to complement. But the nutrition is really what our food, our systems need. So in summary, how do we love our body and our brain? Exercise daily, sleep at least 7 to 8 hours a day, drink lots of water. Our brains are 80% water. How many of us wake up in the morning and we're thirsty, right? Maybe we slept with our mouth open or whatever. So a tip is to take a glass of water to bed with you. You don't necessarily need to drink it before you go to sleep, but make sure it's the first thing you drink when you wake up, before you go for that cup of coffee, because coffee has caffeine, which can be a dehydrant. Eat a balanced diet rich in antioxidants and nutrients. Stay connected to embracing aging so that you have that social interaction, which keeps our brain stimulated, making new connections. And don't be afraid to dance in the kitchen at the foundation like no one is watching. So that's our bottom line. Stay active mentally, physically, socially, and in your community.
Oh my goodness, those are wonderful tips and wonderful information. And you're right, maybe I can dance like no one's watching or exercise like no one's watching while I'm heating up my coffee when we get back into the office. Thank you so much, Martha, for sharing. When I received your information, I started to take that glass of water to bed and drink it first thing in the morning. I always wake up very thirsty and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I've just noticed the past couple of weeks doing that since we talked, just the difference that makes. Instead of putting coffee in my body first, it's a glass of water. So I've been feeling so much better on that. So with that, we want to open it up to all of you to ask Martha questions or comments and share.
Absolutely. What works for you, or what concerns do you have? Let's see, take a quick peek and see what's come in. We got a lot of comments here. I think we're gonna have some friends dancing in the kitchen with us. Yeah, Awakening from Alzheimer's by Peggy Sarlin. That's a good one. I need to look at that. That sounds like a really good one. I got into the aging process because my mother was dying of vascular dementia, and I read the brain science that Dr. Daniel Amen put together, where he cataloged human brains, was able to pinpoint based on his 3D images which lobe of the brain was impaired, and most importantly, what someone with that condition could have done to reduce the risk of developing that condition. And that's when I had my aha moment that building neurological pathways early in life, we also need to keep neurological pathways open and functioning later in life to reduce the risk of cognitive decline. So that's another one I would recommend, if you're particularly concerned about Alzheimer's, dementia, and related brain disorders, Daniel Amen, like Amen, who founded the Amen clinics all over the country. Oh, and his book is called Preventing Alzheimer's.
Martha, we have two questions. One is related to vitamins,
Yes.
and thoughts about that. And then the other is, can you tell us more about the inflammation in the brain function when it comes to sugar,
Oh, yes.
processed sugar?
That's one of the worst offenders of it. Inflammation in general is bad, okay? So if you're not hydrating your body, if you're not nourishing your body effectively, you're not reducing the risk of inflammation, which can lead to diabetes, it can lead to Crohn's disease, it can lead to a lot of other challenges, including impairments of the brain. You don't want to develop inflammation in the brain function, and sugar can do that. I think one of the best things I would recommend, and this is just sort of the newest frontier of biomedicine, is to get a metabolic analysis of yourself to better understand how your particular body processes food as well as medicines so that you can be prescriptive in advocating that you consume what you need and take the appropriate medicines that you might need or vitamin supplements to offset. Um, Back in the old days when I was in high school, I had mononucleosis. I was in bed for 6 weeks, lost a whole summer. And one of the conclusions that the doctor arrived at based on blood work was that I have a vitamin B deficiency. So even though I eat the rainbow, I try to stay active and exercise, my body's not producing enough of the mix of vitamin B compounds, so I take a vitamin B supplement. And that it's made all the difference. I don't get the flu, I don't get sick. I'm 65, I'm still very active. And so my point is get the prescription that works for you. All right. I don't make blanket recommendations, but I do say, based on osteoporosis and how prevalent it is for us older women, my mother had osteoporosis. She started to hunch as she got older. Is I do take a calcium supplement with vitamin D. One of the things that doctors have been prescribing over the counter to help older adults keep strong immune systems is zinc and vitamin D. And you may or may not be getting adequate vitamin D. This is only the 7th day since January. We've had sun in the morning. So we're not getting sunshine, vitamin D through the sunshine readily. So a D supplement can help. It also helps process the calcium that I take to reduce my risk of osteoporosis. So again, I think it's all about what's the right mix for you based on how your body processes. And that's not static either, right? Our bodies change over time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't eat as much as I used to, right? I don't necessarily lose weight, but I'm not gaining weight, which is a good thing. But my point is, I don't need as much food as I used to when I was younger. So that's just a simple example. So yes, cut down on processed sugar. Um, one way to do that is when you go to the grocery store, don't shop the middle aisles.
Just the outer parts, huh?
They tend to have the vegetables and the fruit on one side and the dairy, on the other. Everything in between comes in a box, and boxes have processed sugars and
Uh-huh.
salts. So very simple tip. There's a grocery store that just opened here in Lancaster called Wegmans. It's a chain out of Rochester, New York. It's the only grocery store I've ever been to where you walk into the vegetable department. It's right in the center of the store. So they got the memo. They got the memo.
And Martha, how about any recommendations regarding vitamins for our other question?
Well, I tried to get into that with what I just said about the find out what your blood system needs,
Okay.
what your body needs. But for right now, while we're still in a pandemic, I don't know if you've all been vaccinated. I'm half vaccinated. I'll get my second shot March 5th. But building our immune systems is a great way to withstand the infection. And zinc and vitamin D are two known supplements that can help build our immune systems.
Gotcha. So I wanted to let everyone know that Martha is the founder and CEO of a company called Pasica Group, and we're going to put her contact information in the chat box, her email, her phone number, and her website. And as I also mentioned, we're going to be sending out to everyone her 2-page tips on healthy tips for brain and eating and all aspects of loving your body and brain. And then also, with her permission, I'm going to send the slides, if that's okay, Martha.
Oh, please do. Yes, that
So
would
we'll
be
send the
fine.
slides to everybody as well. And the last slide on the slide deck will also have her contact information, so you can reach out to Martha. Are there any other questions? Oh, our time is flying by quickly. It always does, but we do have a couple minutes. Martha?
I just wanted to underscore some of the comments that have come in through the chat. The Awakening from Alzheimer's book that's been recommended by Peggy Sarlin. And then Dr. Dale Bredston is a very prominent doctor who's done a lot of research around the correlation between nutrition and Alzheimer's. He has a whole protocol of ways to eat to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's. He also collaborates with David Perlmutter. David Perlmutter wrote Grain Brain, as has been said in the chat. I would encourage you to save the chat. Maybe that can be some additional notes that go out to everybody with the slide deck. But David Perlmutter also collaborated with Dr. Rady on a sequel to Spark called Go Wild. And Go Wild actually documents how autism can be overcome by changing the environment in which children live. If they can reduce the stress, reduce the trauma, be out in nature, absorbing natural vitamins through harvesting vegetables and not having the polluted air perhaps of living in the city, it makes a huge difference in terms of how to manage those autism. So the Go Wild is about how do we turn back civilization back to a time when it was easier to live healthy in the wild. So there's some fascinating books out there. They're written for lay audiences, but they're scientifically accurate. And those are the kind of books we like to recommend for reading.
Excellent. Thank you. And my rock star colleague, Roth, recorded the book video title, so we will get those out to everybody as well. And so appreciate his help on these sessions. Martha, one other quick question. Is there something that, we all know that these are things that we need to do, and yet sometimes we don't have the motivation or the inspiration to do them, or we see somebody who we know would benefit from doing some of these things? Do you have any tips that can help us either inspire ourselves or others?
I think one of the best things is to build on the network that you've already got, Kathy, and maybe to think about a book study. I've been trying to get something like that started with the Lancaster Downtowners, which is a village-to-village network of older adults like my husband and me who live in downtown Lancaster. And we've started a health and wellness support group. We've got a speaker coming in from Lancaster General Health to talk about prevention of strokes, what we can do from a diet and exercise point of view at next Thursday afternoon. So given how many recommendations came in just in this chat, if you could tackle these books in a group fashion and then have discussions around them. We actually wrote a discussion guide for Spark, so I can make that available to you if you wanted to start with that book. That's an older book. It came out in 2009. But I think the book club with your network, you can not only embrace aging, you'll be the best at aging. You know what I mean? So
there we go. We might be doing a book club, everyone. Well, thank you so much, Martha, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. We're just loving these sessions. We're just learning so much, and we so appreciate you, Martha, for spending your time with us, sharing your expertise. And we know for all of you who've joined us, there is Zoom fatigue. So the fact that you took time out to come in and be part of this session really means a lot. And we love when you engage with us through the chat and using the reaction buttons. Please join us on March 11th at 10 o'clock when we have our next Embracing Aging online session. It is with Sonia Bloom. It is called Aging is Not a Disease or a Condition. And Sonia thinks that it's not about how old you are, but how you are old. and she facilitates conversations with her peers about ageism and aging well. And she's going to share some of the common themes and tips and ideas that she hears from those discussions. So with all of that,
Sounds awesome.
everyone, we want to say thank you again. We'll get these resources out to you by email, and we hope that you enjoy the beautiful sunshine and blue sky today. Thanks,
Thank you so much,
everybody.
everyone. Stay
Bye-bye.
active. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining.